When we talk about performance tires, and I mean performance tires, the ones that we're using for competitive driving or real race events, we have a tendency to focus on either autocross or road course use.
Yeah.
But we know there are a lot of drivers out there that don't limit themselves to just one discipline.
Right. Drivers may compete in an autocross one weekend and then head up to the track for a track night the next. They may compete in a time trial at a later date. And typically those drivers don't have a dedicated set of wet or rain tires, so their one tire choice may have to work for them in all conditions that race season throws at them.
Yep, so we put together a test with the most popular 200 treadwear tires and some sub 200 treadwear options that focuses only on the track component of our testing. So that's wet track, dry and dry road course to help you find that one tire to rule them all.
It's important to note that we have an additional variable compared to our normal testing. In order to include all the tires we wanted for this test, we had to use two sizes. Some tires tested are 275/35R19, while others are 275/35R18. The results between the two sizes aren't as directly comparable as our usual tests. The 19-inch Extreme Performance Summer tires include the brand new endurance and consistency-focused BF Goodrich G-Force Rival Plus, and its counterpart, the speed-focused G-Force Rival S 1.5. The Bridgestone Potenza RE71RS is a favorite with competitors and our test team, and has tested very well in the past. The Falcon Azenis RT660 Plus is an update on a very strong entry in the category, and the Nankang Sportnext CRS is always near the top of our testing as well. Another new entry is the Vetour Tempesta P1, which has generated a lot of conversation in the enthusiast community, and we're excited to see if it lives up to the hype. The Yokohama Advan A052 needs no introduction, and is the final 19-inch benchmark in the test.
The 18-inch Extreme Performance Summer tires begin with the Continental Extreme Contact Force. It's designed to last long enough for endurance racing while being fast and consistent at the same time. The Goodyear Eagle F1 Supercar 3 is also a long-lasting tire that balances speed with endurance and delivers great driving dynamics. And the Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 240 is included by popular demand from our viewers. We use the Bridgestone Potenza RE71RS as a speed-focused benchmark for the Extreme Performance Summer tires, and it also helps tie in with the next group of 18-inch tires from the streetable track and competition category. The Goodyear Eagle F1 Supercar 3R is a 100 treadwear tire that starts life with just 5/32 of an inch of tread depth, and it's the performance benchmark for the category. The newest competitor in the space is the Hoosier Track Attack Pro. While it has a 200 treadwear rating, it also only has 5/32 of an inch of tread depth when it's brand new. We're excited to find out if it has what it takes to dethrone the Goodyear, and also how it compares to the Potenza RE71RS. The final two 18-inch tires are racetrack and autocross only. The Hoosier A7, which is the benchmark for autocross use, and the Yokohama Advan A055, which is more track focused, so it'll be fun to see how it handles the mixed use case.
For all our testing, the 19 and 18-inch groups were tested on separate days, with no common control tire and no attempt to control variables between the 2 days, so we don't consider the results to be directly comparable between groups. In the 19-inch test group, the Potenza RE71RS and Advan A052 walked away from the competition. The Bridgestone steering was more precise, but they both delivered sharp response to input and strong traction. The Yokohama was more sensitive to moments of hydroplaning, which contributed to its slight lap time disadvantage. Around 0.8 of a second back, the G-Force Rival Plus required a few corners to learn how it liked to be driven, ultimately favoring a traditional slow-in, fast-out strategy. The limit between grip and slip was razor thin, but it also recovered very quickly, so there wasn't as much lap time penalty for stepping over the edge. It just kept the driver's hands very busy. The Azenis RT660 Plus was similar in that it moved around a lot. It was controllable and easily corrected thanks to immediately quick steering response, but the rear would step out with minimal provocation. The subjective story was very much the same with the G-Force Rival S 1.5, which had almost identical lap times to the Falcon, but it felt edgier and required more attention from the driver to keep the vehicle pointed in the proper direction. The Tempesta P1 wasn't a huge step back in pace, but subjectively it received the lowest scores from our drivers. The steering created immense front axle authority that could easily overpower the rear and send the car into a time-robbing drift. If you got it just right, it was manageable, otherwise it was just a handful. The Sportnext CRS was a handful simply because it was down on traction. It would slip and slide every step of the way, requiring the driver just to slow down and stay within its limits. Ultimately, there was a 2-second difference between the Nankang at the back and the Bridgestone at the top of the charts. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the Bridgestone led our objective braking and lateral traction testing as well, with the G-Force Rival Plus around 9 feet back in braking and 0.04 of a G behind on the skid pad. The Zenith RT 660 Plus, G-Force Rival S 1.5, and Advan A052 were tightly grouped in braking, and the Yokohama had the second highest lateral traction. The Tempesta P1 was a few feet longer in braking and started to fall from the group laterally, and the Sportnext CRS was a big jump back in both metrics.
In the 18-inch size, the Potenza RE71RS again led the group, though this time it was a second ahead of the next fastest Eagle F1 Supercar 3. The Goodyear had solid, direct steering and nice communication of its limits, but it couldn't overcome the traction disparity to the test-leading Bridgestone. The Pilot Sport Cup 2 240 was around a second and a half behind the leader, and its inconsistent traction and handling behavior didn't earn much endearment from our drivers. The Extreme Contact Force rounded out the group of extreme performance summer tires. The satisfying steering couldn't overcome the relative lack of grip that wanted to push the car sideways quickly. The Streetable Track and Competition tires clearly belonged in a different category in the wet. While the Eagle F1 Supercar 3R was a tenth of a second faster than the Track Attack Pro, they both had noticeable issues with hydroplaning, even at the relatively slow speeds and low water depth of our test track. Our team had to slow down all inputs to ensure we didn't upset the minimal traction provided by the tires. Exacerbating that issue even further were the racetrack and autocross only tires. Their near-slick patterns have almost nowhere to accommodate standing water, so hydroplaning was a constant concern. This is a good time to note that due to the scarcity of inventory for the Advan A055, we had to reuse the set from the road course portion of this test, so they had 8 track laps on them going into the wet testing. Even with the light wear, they were 2.5 seconds faster than the Hoosier, but still far off the pace of anything else in the test. The Hoosier's 40.62 second average lap was nearly 10 seconds slower than the Bridgestone at the top of the charts. The top 3 spots in 60 to 0 mph braking were relatively close, with the Bridgestone and Michelin essentially tied at 157 feet and the Goodyear 4 feet behind. This group led the skid pad testing as well, though the Goodyear and Bridgestone swapped positions. The Extreme Contact Force wasn't too far behind, at 168 feet in braking and 0.73 Gs of lateral traction. There was a huge jump when we moved to the Streetable Track and Competition tires, though between the two, the Goodyear held a noticeable advantage in wet traction over the Track Attack Pro, which took 60 feet longer to come to a stop than the Bridgestone. Realistically, that number should have been longer. Both Streetable Track and Competition tires required so much room to come to a stop that they exceeded our normal braking lane and ended up on an unused, higher grip portion of the track. With that in mind, we knew we didn't have enough room for the racetrack and autocross only tires to safely come to a stop before we ran out of road, so we made the executive decision to perform 50 to 0 mph stops and use math to extrapolate the braking distance from 60 to 0. The Yokohama and Hoosier required 306 and 311 feet respectively, which is essentially double the length of the Bridgestone.
Once the track dried off, the finishing order for our 19-inch test group saw a serious shakeup. In the dry, the Tempesta P1 set the fastest laps of the group. The steering earned the highest score from our team and allowed us to get back to throttle faster than any other tire in the test. From there, the Sportnext CRS and Advan A052 were tied a tenth of a second back, and the Potenza RE71RS, even though it earned the highest subjective score, was another 0.07 of a second from there. The Zenith RT 660 Plus was very nice to drive with sharp steering and loss of engagement from the rear axle that allowed it to nearly match the Bridgestone's times. The G-Force Rival Plus and G-Force Rival S 1.5 felt very similar subjectively. Overall, they were both very nice to drive, though they also had the tendency to push slightly from mid-corner to corner exit, which ultimately held back their subjective scores and their lap times slightly. Looking at the purely objective figures, the top 5 tires were almost within the noise of our testing for both 60 to 0 braking and lateral traction. A short 1.7 feet separated the tire at the top from the 5th place Yokohama, and 0.01 G was the only differentiation between the same group in lateral traction. Once again, the BF Goodrich products were a very small step back in both metrics.
The results of our dry testing for the 18-inch group mostly played out how one might expect, with the Hoosier A7 and Advan A055 tied at the top, though our team preferred the more natural feeling of the Yokohama to the Hoosier's vague, aloof feel. 0.2 of a second back was the Eagle F1 Supercar 3R, with the Potenza RE71RS hot on its heels. The Track Attack Pro was very fast on its first lap, but it fell off and became imprecise with every subsequent lap after the first, ultimately landing mid-pack with a 27.26 second average. The Eagle F1 Supercar 3 continued to straddle the line between the fast tires and the endurance-focused tires, and our team again was very happy with its crisp, direct steering, confident traction, and tossable handling dynamics. The Extreme Contact Force and Pilot Sport Cup 2 240 were closely matched at the back, nearly a full second behind the racetrack and autocross-only tires. The Eagle F1 Supercar 3R nearly matched the best for lateral traction with 1.08 Gs, but it required an additional 5 feet to come to a stop. The Potenza RE71 RS and Track Attack Pro were essentially tied in both metrics, and the Eagle F1 Supercar 3 matched their skid pad figures while taking 4 additional feet to come to a stop. The Pilot Sport Cup 2 240 and Extreme Contact Force both finished at 1 G on the skid pad, and the Continental had the longest stopping distance of 102.8 feet.
Subjectively, we found very similar characteristics on the road course as we did on our track at Tire Rack headquarters, with no surprise handling traits. In the 19-inch test group, the Potenza RE71 RS had the fastest single lap of 1 minute 38.38 seconds and the fastest average lap too, with a 1 minute 39.78 seconds. The Tempesta P1 had the 4th fastest single lap of 1 minute 39.64, but it exhibited some of the best consistency in the group and set the 2nd fastest average lap time of 1 minute 40.08. The G-Force Rival S 1.5 ran a fast lap of 1 minute 39.7 and an average of 1 minute 40.14, which is also remarkably consistent for what's marketed as an autocross-focused tire. The Sport Next CRS was very consistent in our 2024 track test, but it couldn't match that performance this year, where it set the 2nd fastest single lap but fell to mid-pack with a 1 minute 40.57 average. The biggest surprise of this year's test was the Advent A052. It shockingly set the slowest fast lap and was the only tire that couldn't break the 140 mark, but it remained relatively consistent and averaged 140.88 over our timed laps. The Zenus RT660 Plus was towards the bottom in both for its fast and its average, and the G-Force Rival Plus surprisingly matched the pace of the Rival S 1.5, but it could only do it once. It fell off sharply after the first magic lap and then settled in for consistent pace that averaged 1 minute 41 seconds.
In our 18-inch test size, the Advan A055 and A7 were interesting competitors. They set almost identical fast laps in the 1 minute 37.9s, but the Yokohama maintained its pace for considerably longer and ended up with a test-leading 1 minute 38.67 second average lap. The Potenza RE71 RS couldn't match the best for single lap speed, but it remained relatively consistent for a solid 3rd in test average lap of 1 minute 39.14 seconds. The Eagle F1 Supercar 3R delivered what was probably the biggest surprise of the test. Its first timed lap matched the Advan A055 at a 1 minute 37.95, but it couldn't recapture that magic, and it ended with a 1 minute 39.64 second average as it fell off with subsequent laps. Subjectively, the Eagle F1 Supercar 3 was one of our favorite tires to drive, and it was also one of the most consistent. It couldn't match the single lap speed of the leaders, but it was consistent enough to land mid-pack for average time. The Track Attack Pro fell toward the back with its 1 minute 38.88 second fast lap, and it slowed down as it built heat, ultimately finishing with an average over the 1 minute 40 second mark. The Pilot Sport Cup 2 240 and Extreme Contact Force are both endurance focused, and while the Michelin's fast lap was a significant 0.8 faster than the Continental, it lost more pace with heat, and the two ended up a 1/10 apart for average laps.
Utilizing the ferro arm we use to measure vehicles for wheel and tire fitment, we're able to compare the wear rates between the tires in our test by measuring the change in tread depth on the front left tire from each set, which is the position that sees the most wear in our testing. We measured the tires when they were brand new, and then again after we were finished with our testing. Green indicates that region of the tire has identical or a 0.5 millimeter greater tread than when it started, with yellow and red indicating more gain than that due to rubber pickup or migration. The more important colors are the blues and purples, with light blue indicating a 0.5 to 1.5 millimeter of tread loss, and dark blue or purple or pink showing a loss of 2 to 3 or more millimeters of tread compared to the new tire. It's important to note that this wear is based on a limited number of laps, in our vehicle, with our drivers, so your mileage may vary. The G-Force Rival Plus lives up to its endurance-focused promise, at least compared to its brand mate. The G-Force Rival S 1.5 exhibits significantly more wear on the leading edges of its two intermediate ribs, in addition to the trailing edge of the outboard element. The Potenza RE71RS lost the most overall depth, with around 1 mm across the entire face and 2 to 2.5 mm of loss at the leading edge of both intermediate ribs. The Azenis RT660 Plus saw around 1.5 mm of tread loss on the outboard shoulder and the leading edge of the center rib. The Sport Next CRS was one of the best in terms of wear, only experiencing around 0.5 mm of wear on the ribs and around 1 mm on the most abused outboard shoulder. The Tempesta P1 saw significant wear of 1.5 to 2 mm on the shoulder and 1 to 1.5 mm on both ribs. Lastly, the Advent A052 was very close to the Nankang for wear, with 0.5 to 1 mm of tread loss at the highest wear locations of the tread pattern.
The Potenza RE71RS was used as the control tire for the 18-inch Extreme Performance Summer Test Group, so it was driven for twice as many laps as the other tires, and the wear shows it. It lost 1 to 1.5 mm over nearly the entire tread face, with spots of 2 to 2.5 mm on the outboard shoulder and second intermediate rib, and 3 to 4 mm of degradation on the first rib, though experience has shown that the beveling of the intermediate ribs tends to level out with more use. The Extreme Contact Force lived up to its long life reputation, with almost no measurable wear anywhere other than the leading edge of the center rib. The Eagle F1 Supercar 3 also resisted wear very nicely, though it lost about 1 mm on the outboard shoulder and leading edges of the intermediate ribs. The final Extreme Performance Summer tire was the Pilot Sport Cup 2 240, and it exhibited the most wear aside from the control tire. On the outboard shoulder, it lost 1.5 to 2 mm of tread, and up to 2.5 mm of tread on the leading edges of the two intermediate ribs. The Eagle F1 Supercar 3R served as the control for the sub-200 treadwear tires in the test, and it wore remarkably well in that task, with tread loss concentrated almost exclusively in the outboard shoulder. The scans of the A7 and A055 are remarkably similar, with both tires losing depth only on the outboard shoulder, though the Yokohama's is slightly more severe.
We hope you found this video helpful for finding the right competition tire for what, where, and how you drive.
If you want to see how the 19-inch Extreme Performance Summer tires perform on the road, or if you're interested in seeing a test of the 6 fastest racetrack and autocross only tires on the track, we have those videos and more in this series. If you have any questions or feedback, be sure to leave them in the comment section below.
Yes.
We try to read and address as many of those as we can. And of course, be sure to like and subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.